Welcome to Podsdale, where we explore the stories that make Scottsdale truly special. I'm your host, Holly Walter from the city's Office of Communication. Join me as we learn what makes Scottsdale tick. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. So our topic today is not only timely, but pretty serious, but important for us to talk about. And today we have experts in this area to talk to us about water safety and what we can do to keep our children and adults safe. We have Dave Folio and Lori Stauffer with the Scottsdale Fire Department. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
So we thought it would be important to jump into this topic. It's something we talk about every year here in Arizona, especially in the summer, but this year has been particularly troubling. We've had a lot of water-related incidents, and sadly, we've had some drownings as well. What have you seen here in Scottsdale this summer?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, yesterday you saw a 3-year-old in Glendale drowning there late in the afternoon. Yesterday, we had a drowning actually in one of our lakes where an individual went into one of our ponds by himself and slipped under the water. You know, we've done a lot of media this year. I've actually done a lot of live hits with several of the news channels, and you just can't get the message out enough, right? You just wish you could grab people. Like 2 seconds is too long. The biggest thing that grabbed the headlines for some of the news that I did was it's a silent killer. That's what people need to understand. They slip under the water. You don't hear them yell. You don't hear them cry. They die. That's just the simple facts. So we've had more than we need to. I can tell you that. One is too many because they're all preventable. Lori will, I'm sure, discuss a lot of the prevention part of it. She's extremely passionate about it like we are. These calls are traumatic for the crews also. This last recent one a couple months ago in the city, we had crews that responded on that, and they all had little ones also. So on that truck. So there's a whole nother side to that of just our peer support groups that help out our firefighters. But yeah, we're definitely seeing it still. And every news channel's talking about it. Every radio channel has some sort of, hey, 2 seconds is too long. Watch your children around water, but it's still happening.
The silent killer part, I thought that was really important for you to mention because it's not like what we see on TV or in the movies where you see someone flailing and splashing around and yelling for help, especially a child, right? Once they go under the water, you can't see or hear anything.
Yeah, no, it's tragic. For me, it's those calls that just stick with you too. Like the grieving on the parents' voices when you get there is just, you never put, it's one of the calls you just never forget because like I said, it's preventable.
And what are some of the numbers we're seeing valley-wide this year? I heard that sadly, they've been high.
Yes, we are above our whole number from 2023. Today, we are more than the drownings that we had in child drownings in July that we did at all of 2023. I don't really understand or know what the silver bullet is of what is the reason, except that we are seeing that, I guess, parents just don't understand that whole thing of it can happen to you.
Right.
It's not just a bad parents. Stop abdicating your responsibility to a lifeguard or just assuming that your child is going to listen to you or not go near the water just because you've taught them to stay away from the water. We have to understand that, yes, 2 seconds is too long. Watch your kids around water, but parents believe that they do. So we have to put other layers of protection in place.
Right.
Barriers and swim lessons and putting those life vests on.
Do you think it's just people feeling, you kind of mentioned it, it could never happen to me sort of thing? The fact that it happens so quickly, anything you can attribute this increase to?
It's very confusing because the Drowning Prevention Coalition of Arizona has been around for more than 30 years, and really the basic tenets of how to prevent drownings has not changed. We know it's supervision, we know it's barriers, we know it's learning how to swim, we know all of those things. So it's very interesting to me that all of a sudden no one's paying attention to that.
Right.
And even if we say it differently, it's still like, this can happen to you. Assume that it will and put all of those protections in place because, again, if it's a barrier issue, let's fix that. And we often see that a lot of times in the winter months. In the summer months, it's a supervision issue. But really, when we're seeing kids, more than 70% of the kids who are drowning in street clothes.
Okay.
We don't expect them to be near the water.
Uh-huh.
So you have to put those other layers of protection in place. We know that you're not going to have your eyes on your kids all of the time when they're not in the water. So put the layers in place. When they are in the water or near the water, you have to have your eyes on them all the time, or someone needs to make that assignment.
And we're talking a lot about children today, but also this applies with adults too. Have we seen an increase in water-related incidents involving adults?
In Scottsdale specifically, we know that 75% of our water-related incidents do involve adults.
Okay.
We see people across really across the country. If it's an adult drowning, it's because they went into the pool by themselves and they went in with maybe adult beverages on board or something else, or they're just not feeling well, because especially in our older adults, you're going to see them, if they went into the water alone and they've drowned, it's usually because they had a cardiac arrest or a stroke and no one was there to realize that this is the problem and was able to pull them out. We also see a lot of adults who drown on open water. That's your lakes and your rivers. Don't put your bear muscles on and think that you can go swimming around without a life vest on.
Mm-hmm.
Swimming in a pool is different than swimming on the open water. If you're not a good swimmer in a pool, you're going to be terrible on the lakes and rivers. So you have to wear those life vests, keep you on top of the water, especially when you get fatigued, and you will have a much better time doing that than the alternative.
Right. And I would assume that there's other hazards in open water too underneath the surface that you don't see that could cause a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in our green belts and places like that, the ponds, you have tree limbs that get pushed into there. You have park benches. There's just other things underneath the water that you can't see. There could be suction drains that are under there that supply piping to flow the water flow, that the fountain that's in that lake at a different location, and you don't know about it. So just not a good idea to swim in any of our open waters. It's actually, as we learned yesterday, SPD's pushing that it's a citation to actually swim in any of our lakes along the greenbelt. So not a good idea. Water's dirty anyways. You know,
Right.
One of the things that amazes me too is, going back to the children part of it, most people will spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on T-ball, but they won't spend $25 to $75 on swim lessons. That amazes me. So it's an opportunity. It doesn't cost a lot of money to take swim lessons. It takes a little bit of your time, an hour a week or more. But definitely people need to get swim lessons.
And what price do you put on safety? So you're talking
Right.
about swim lessons, but it makes me insane every year when I go to the grocery store and they have the little floaties for 99 cents and I want to put a sign on there from the Drowning Prevention Coalition or your local fire department that says, this is not a life-saving device. Do not put this on your child and think it's going to save them. It is a toy. It actually says that on the floaties. So if your child needs help in the water, put a life vest on them.
Okay.
Please.
So you wouldn't recommend the arm floaties that
No.
you see? Okay.
Not at all. We have statistics that show and evidence that shows those are definitely not something that you want to put on your kids and think that that's going to save them.
Mm-hmm. Probably also gives them a false sense of security.
100%.
Okay. And now let's talk a little bit about then some of the prevention measures that we can take in the community as parents or people who just, care about our kids and others and want to keep them safe. What are some of the things we can do?
Always number one, we talk about the supervision. And it's not just the parents. We have to think about, if you are leaving your child with a caregiver, make sure that they really understand that responsibility. Unfortunately, Dave and I had a conversation with a mom that I've worked with quite a bit with a coalition who had twin boys, and grandma was watching the kids, and they had just moved into the house. It was their dream home, but they did not have a pool fence up yet. Grandma fell asleep on the sofa. The twin boys, who were 2 at the time, found their way into the water. One of them got himself out and woke grandma up and said, Odie's in the pool. And unfortunately, he died. This was several years ago, and Stacy lives with this every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Every parent that's had to go through this, if the drowning was 20 years ago, they can go back to the details of that day and grieve all over again because it is such a tragic thing. So you have to take that upon yourself and make sure your caregivers understand what the expectation is. And I also want to point out that even at public pools, there's this perception that the lifeguards are going to watch the kids and you get to go and enjoy your magazine and your friends and you're scrolling through your Instagram. That is not the case. They are your backup. If you have a child, especially under the age of 5, you need to be within touch supervision, whether it's in your backyard pool or in a public pool. And you cannot blame those lifeguards for something happening to your child. And we actually saw that in a East Valley situation this summer where where 2 sisters had come to the pool and were screaming at the lifeguard because of something that happened to one of the 2-year-olds that they brought. It's like, well, where were you?
Right.
The lifeguards were able, and thankfully, in the 2 incidents that happened this summer at a public pool, both children survived without any deficits. But you have to understand that no matter where you are, your children are your responsibility. Keep your eyes on them.
Mm-hmm. Shows how quickly it happens, too.
Oh my gosh, so fast. Okay, so we know that supervision fails. There is a difference between a lapse of supervision and a lack of supervision. A lack is when you've deliberately taken your child, for instance, into a bathtub with water in it and you've walked away. You deliberately did that. Okay. And that's when we usually see when parents are being cited because you knew that. A lapse of supervision, which happens with everybody, particularly just on your daily, you don't have your eyes on your kids all the time. And if they've eloped out of your house somehow through a doggy door or whatever and found themselves in the water, this happens, which is why we go to that second layer of protection, which is that barrier. You have to put things in place to slow down that access to the water for those children. That's barriers, the 5-foot wrought iron pool fences. One of the most popular alternatives to the wrought iron pool fence is the mesh fencing. It's very popular. I would highly encourage anybody who's looking at those to make sure that you're still getting the 5-foot height, not the 4-foot that's available. I've seen kids climb over the 4-foot.
Oh, kids can climb.
Oh, yeah. Even when you think there's no toe holds for them, I've seen them get over that. But they don't typically do that over the 5-foot unless they had something that helped them climb over. So you get the 5-foot. What we're seeing, though, with the mechanical pool covers or the pool nets, it takes time to remove those and put them back on. So a lot of parents or caregivers will become complacent and they won't put that back on, especially if they think that they're going to use it again later in the day. I say this might work for grandparents' homes when you don't have a child in your home all of the time. That might work for you. But in reality, when you've got a toddler that you're running around, it's much easier for you to take a second to pull that gate shut than have to spend the 7 to 10 minutes to put that pool net back on or push the button to get the cover on. So barriers are super important, and that can even the bathroom door. We've had kids who drown in toilets, which when I say that in the elementary school, the kids are like, oh, and I'm like, I know, but little kids don't know that that's a gross place to play. And we have had kids drown in toilets. Anything that holds more than an inch of water is a drowning hazard. So you've got to be cognizant of buckets, dog dishes, large fish tanks, the toilet, and of course the bathtub. So consider those things when you're looking around and going, what kind of trouble could my child get into? And really understand that this is something that has happened and you don't want it to happen to you.
Going back to the barriers and the fencing, are there laws in Scottsdale or ordinances that provide guidance to homeowners with pools?
Yes, and years ago, the Drowning Prevention Coalition got the state law passed, but unfortunately, there was a little bit of a loophole, so then everybody had to go back to work and go to the individual cities to close up some of those loopholes. But in Scottsdale, really, it's the 5-foot wrought iron pool fence that they talk about the most in the ordinance, and then some other layers of protection, which are door alarms and locks on windows and everything. The key really is what can we do to slow that action? There are some cities that I believe still have spiny vegetation considered a barrier to the pool. And that's not really, I would not put that around my pool anyway. And we all know spiny vegetation is like cactus. That might be a deterrent to something, but it's not really going to be a circle around your pool.
Right.
So Scottsdale, it just really firms up what the state law is. And the state law really says up until age 6, you need to have a barrier around your pool. But the Scottsdale law really gets in there and says, okay, you need to have it be an isolation fence. And if you ever have any questions, you can contact the city and we'll kind of walk through what it is that you're thinking you want to put around your pool and whether that's going to meet the requirements.
And that's a great segue because we actually do offer a lot of help to those who are wanting to make sure that their home is safe and their pool area is safe. So what's some of the assistance that the fire department can provide?
We do have a water safety assessment that you can have us come out. It's free, and we can really look around your home and identify if there are any hazards and what you can do to fix them. We won't fix them. It will be completely up to you, but you will have your eyes open to, oh, I didn't think about this. Really, when it comes down to it, we just want to make sure that the pool is isolated, that the children don't have access to it, that we don't have anything that's going to allow them to climb over that fence, including putting benches or even trees or anything that's close enough that they can use to climb. A lot of kids will not even think twice about it and not try to breach that barrier. But there are some kids that are, little monkeys, and they will do anything that they can to climb over. And we just want to make sure that we're being safe. The other thing that we experienced, I believe it was last year, where a child was in a backyard that did not have a pool, but the neighbor did. The parents were not thinking about what was actually on the other side of that block fence. The child was able to climb over the block fence and then got into their neighbor's pool. So you have to not just think about your own backyard, but think about what's around you and ensure that you're not allowing access to that either.
Wow. Yeah, that's something I don't think I would have thought about, but it's good to mention that. What are some other things that we should keep in mind?
Swim lessons, as Dave was mentioning, it not only gives kids skills in the water, there's also proof that it increases developmental stages and gives them amazing properties in the water. So we know that that's a good thing. We also have to understand that it doesn't matter how many swimming lessons you've had, you're still never drown proof.
Sure.
Olympic swimmers don't go in the water without somebody on the pool deck. So we do not want anybody, no matter what age you are, to go into the water by yourself and think that you're going to be able to swim around and save yourself, because a lot of times you don't realize. I want to say for adults, if you do not feel well, do not go in the water. And if you're starting to feel unwell, get out of the water. Unfortunately, earlier this year, we had a fatality of an adult who had been swimming in the community pool in their neighborhood, and he ended up dying because they didn't realize that he was actually having an event until it was too late.
Okay. So that's a good point. Don't be complacent. Even if your children have had lessons, we still need to apply the other safety rules that we have talked about, adult supervision, the barriers, and don't feel like you're out of the woods just because your child has had some swim lessons.
Exactly. And stack those swim lessons. Every year, increase those skills, right? And then that also reinforces that safety for them as well and makes them have a more enjoyable time themselves in the water, that they know how to do something other than a dog paddle. It is important for them to know it's that layer of protection that is going to take them into their adulthood when you don't have any control over the fact that they're floating down the river.
Well, and then we talked about swim lessons and that really through the city, they're quite affordable. But even better, in August, in fact, we are offering free swim lessons the entire month, resident or non-resident. The registration for residents opens a bit sooner than non-residents, but that will be coming out near the end of the month where you can sign up and you're not paying anything.
And I think that's a beautiful offering for people. Grab a hold of it. We know that people are a little nervous sometimes about how much money it costs to take swim lessons. I love the aquatic facilities throughout the valley because it's a lot more affordable for many families than the private swim schools. So taking advantage of that. I also want to encourage those people who might not be children, who don't know how to swim, to take those classes as well. You won't necessarily be taking your swim lessons next to a 5-year-old and being all embarrassed about it. They do have adult swim lessons. We have this idea that once someone turns the age of 7, they must know how to swim. We need to understand that your child might know how to swim, but is that child visiting you know how to swim? And we've had children who are 12, 13, 14 years old who are drowning because they don't know how to swim. And then we have caregivers who are supposed to be watching the kids in the water. And would they even know how to respond because they don't have swim skills either?
Now, you've talked a lot about the Arizona Drowning Coalition, and you've been part of that organization for a long time. Can you talk about what that group does?
So the Drowning Prevention Coalition of Arizona was established back in the 80s. They recognized that there was a giant water issue in the valley, specifically with kids. So they came together. It was fire departments, health officials, anybody who had a passion for trying to stop this epidemic, because it really was terrible back then. Through the years, we've had ordinances that were in place, and then we consistently come together to talk about what are the trends and what are the messaging that we need to get out. Through the efforts of the Drowning Prevention Coalition and then getting it out to the media and to the families and everything, we've seen the drowning rate go down so that we're really looking at about 8 incidents per 100,000 people, which is significant considering it was about 60 per 100,000 people back in the 80s. Now, this year, again, is a terrible year.
Yeah.
Every day, we're seeing drowning calls come out across the valley. Now, luckily, not every one of those is a fatality, but every one of them makes your heart stop and clench your fists and shake. It's like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand this can happen to you. Pay attention, put those layers of protection in place. There's all kinds of resources out there for you. The Drowning Prevention Coalition has on their website lists of how to get CPR classes, if you need help with your getting a pool fence, if you need any kind of resources when it comes to that, including getting a life vest, contact the Drowning Prevention Coalition and contact your local fire department. We all work hand in hand together to prevent this. And we hope that this stops this year and we don't go any further with the numbers that we have.
And I know you're passionate about this. In fact, I think we first met many, many years ago through this type of work. And I know that it's something very close to your heart. And as you mentioned, Lori, there are resources out there, not only in Scottsdale, but other valley cities. And there's help out there if you need it in, like you mentioned, CPR, swim lessons. And, even though the group has been messaging for years and years and years, it's worth repeating every year because we do have a lot of people who come to Arizona from other parts in the country, and maybe they're not as familiar with backyard pools. So I think it's important to continue to have the conversation.
Our goal every year is that we don't want to have any drowning incidents.
Right.
I also am a realist and know that we'll probably never get to that place, but really getting that message out every year and people receiving it and saying, this can happen to me. Through my work from Phoenix Children's Hospital to Scottsdale Fire Department, I have met way too many families who have experienced this in their life. It is tragic, and it just breaks your heart every time when you know that there was a break in that prevention chain that could have helped save that child had those things been in place.
Now, let's talk about CPR. Hopefully you never have to use it, but how important is it to have that skill if you're present when a water-related accident occurs?
And I'll pass this on to David here in a second, but we know that it's important for you to do mouth-to-mouth CPR when it is a drowning. We have to get the oxygen back in the system to feed the brain. What's happening is brain death when we don't get oxygen. So we start with 5 breaths, and then we go into the 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths, over and over again. It is critical for us to start that before the firefighters get on scene so that we can give them their best chance of doing all of the things that they can do to help with that child.
Yeah, there's nothing like walking through the gate of that pool area when you're going on a drowning and you see CPR in progress and then you start hearing that child cry. Like that is like, woo, okay, somebody knew CPR. They started giving the oxygen back to the child and they're crying because the outcome is a lot better if that happens. The numbers shoot through the roof. Just want to remind people too, when you're done swimming, you've had a great day, take the toys and the floaties out of the pool, lock the gate. Don't dummy lock the gate. Lock the gate behind you. You've had a great time, but don't give them any opportunity from the other side to see their toys that are in the pool and make them want to go over the fence to go get them. So take everything out of the pool. But yeah, I can't understate the importance of taking CPR and knowing how to administer CPR if something were to happen.
And what other tips can you provide? Any other closing thoughts as we wrap up the conversation?
Know that it can happen to you. Doesn't matter what age you are. When it's children, you've got to have your eyes on them. If you are having a pool party, make that assignment or hire someone to be watching the water. If you don't make that assignment, the challenge happens where the parents are looking at their own kids and not paying attention to anybody else. I've experienced that myself. You've got to watch your kids around water. When you don't expect them to be in the water, make sure that the barriers are in place and they're unbreachable. Learn to swim, no matter what age you are. Again, know how to swim. Put that life vest on. Unfortunately, we had a dad who drowned on an open water, and the mom said he was not a strong swimmer in a pool, and he went out with his friends on a boat and didn't have a life vest on and drowned right in front of the family. So you have to make sure that you're putting those life vests on. On our lakes and rivers around specifically the Phoenix area, a lot of times there are life jacket loaner stations. Take advantage of those. That is one of our partners with the DBCA, the Ryan Thomas Foundation, and Game and Fish partner to provide those life vests. Don't be afraid or embarrassed to use them. They can save your life. And again, that critical thing is if all of those layers fail, we have to know how to do CPR. Right. By the way, if you lose track of a child, which does happen from time to time, always check the pool first. Always check the pool first. And if you don't have a pool, check your neighbor's pool. Because we actually had a drowning when I was at Phoenix Children's Hospital when the mom thought, oh, we don't have a pool. I don't have to worry about it. And he got out through their gate, got in the neighbor's gate, and drowned in the neighbor's pool. So it happens. It is devastating. It is so emotional when you think about it. And even in my own life, when my daughters, I have 23 and a 27-year-old, when Savannah was 3, she was out swimming with her sister and her dad in their backyard pool. I happened to be working. And when I got home, their dad said, I have to tell you about this. And I'm so grateful that he did, although, you might be tempted not to say it, but he had said he was out there swimming. He was kind of throwing Amanda around in the pool. Savannah had one of those blow-up floaty rings around her waist, and she was jumping in and swimming to the side and jumping in and swimming to the side and jumping in. And he realized the pattern had stopped out of the side of his eye, and he turned and looked. And this 3-year-old with her chubby little legs were flailing in the out of the water, and her head was in the water. The inner tube was keeping her from righting herself. So he quickly sweeps her up. And this is a child, especially back then, she had that platinum blonde hair and these dimples that go on for miles, these big blue eyes. And she said, Daddy, I was screaming for you, but you couldn't hear me.
Wow.
And every time I tell that story, the hair raises on my arms. And I think about all of those families that I've had to work with and think about their child who was in the water thinking, someone's surely going to come get me. And they weren't there. And I never want anybody to experience that ever. It's devastating on so many levels. And when a drowning happens, rarely does that family stay intact. Divorces happen, family members get cut out. The whole world has changed now because of this one incident.
Now, online resources, where can listeners go just to find out more information?
On our city website, there's all kinds of information. Just type in pool safety. It'll get you to those swim lessons that the aquatic centers have. We have all kinds of information on the fire department website. Check out our social media. There's information a lot of times on that. The Drowning Prevention Coalition of Arizona, their website is preventdrownings.org. Check it out. Get the resources you have. Be armed with this information and do what you can to protect your families and your friends.
And that's a good way to wrap this up. Lori, Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Podsdale. If you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe. You can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with us by emailing communications@scottsdaleaz.gov. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Holly Walter signing off and inviting you to be part of the Scottsdale story.